I learned so much from him, off the mats at that. But then on top of that, all these years later, right, I sold the company. Luke decided he wanted to go off to HubSpot. He got recruited over to HubSpot after I sold the company shortly. But then all these years later, Luke actually ended up hiring me and was my boss at HubSpot as well. Initially, I was happy where I was and what I was doing, and then started to kind of get a little bored, and he had the right timing and said, hey, why don't you, I'm getting promoted. I'm looking for a backfill for my role, and I think you'd actually be great for it. And then all those years later, he ended up hiring me, and he became my boss. And we still manage that great relationship. I still kind of keep in touch with him. Actually, we have a call later today. I'm going to be talking to him, just kind of catching up on a personal level. And I still seek his advice and guidance and vice versa.
Welcome to My Best Hire. I'm your host, Rajeev Soni. On this show, we decode how great leaders identify exceptional talent and how outstanding professionals become invaluable to their organizations. Through in-depth conversations with executives and business leaders, we uncover both sides of the success equation, helping leaders build stronger teams while showing professionals how to stand out and make a lasting impact. So, whether you are building teams or looking to advance your own career, join us as we explore the stories of remarkable talent and the leaders who recognize their potential. Today on My Best Hire, we have Gabe Wahhab. He is a product marketing dynamo and a 4x founder with 2 successful exits. Most recently, he was the senior product marketing manager at HubSpot, and there he co-led the blockbuster Content Hub launch. Gabe's got a knack for turning marketing insights into go-to-market strategy gold, and his expertise spans B2B marketing, AI-driven solutions, and revenue operations. And what truly sets Gabe apart is his remarkable journey of resilience. Starting with his collegiate wrestling career, he transformed from a one-win freshman into an All-American status, and then went on to become a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion. On a personal note, though we only met a few months ago, I feel like we have been friends for years. Gabe is based near Milwaukee, and he joins us today to share insights about his best hire and the valuable lessons he learned about identifying and developing exceptional talent. Gabe, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Rajeev. And so true. We only met a few months ago, but I feel like we have known each other forever. Our conversations are so free flowing and easy to have.
Absolutely. So why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, it's interesting. You kind of brought up a little bit of my personal life too with wrestling, and I think a lot of what actually defines me. And if you talk to actually a lot of people who've wrestled in their life, they'll actually go back and talk about wrestling, and that's really something that has just brought that mindset, that drive, that resilience to always kind of pursue and win. And it did that for me. I wasn't naturally good at it. It's something that I just had this drive to win, and just with wrestling, there is no way through it. You have to work hard. And so that's a lot of where my work ethic comes from, and that drive to win. And I actually started myself as an entrepreneur. I had somebody who came to me while I was in college and said, hey, I'm going to pay you $25 an hour. Will you create a website for me? And we're talking 2001. Everybody started needing a website. And that was something that I just had natural interest in and was doing on my own for fun. And I said, yeah, sure. And then they referred me, and I also had this interest in computing. And I created some of the first like webcams ever to be made, where we would take these analog cameras that businesses would have. And I custom built these PCs to then put an image online every 30 seconds, because we're talking like dial-up modem, still 56K at this time, just turning to DSL. So, but now this, they were able to take this person who used to go to every single business and would go check to make sure these businesses opened and closed on time, 10 different locations. And now they could just, sit and do that from their computer. And so that turned into a full-fledged IT business, a full-fledged web development business, ended up selling the IT business to focus on the web development business. And then from that, then started a media company as well, and a AI company very early on in 2018. And then at that point, then decided I wanted to take being an entrepreneur to an intrapreneur. And that's when I then started working for HubSpot and go to market strategy there, product marketing, and then here we are today, and I'm just about to actually start off my next opportunity as well, which I'm super excited about. So that's me in a nutshell, former entrepreneur turned entrepreneur.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. In fact, I didn't even know all of those points that you spoke about. So, yeah, like as you very rightly said, that okay, we have met only a few months ago, but it feels like okay, we have been friends for so long. It's
Yes.
funny how it works with so many people. All right, Gabe, this is my best hire. So, who are we speaking about today?
Man, today we're talking about Luke, and super interesting story with Luke. Luke and I actually met doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So he was still in college. I had finished college. I continued my business after college, and I was starting to grow it. And so we had kind of been working on some projects together on the side. I had seen like, hey, this is a really sharp kid. He's also doing his own businesses, also doing a lot of entrepreneurial things in college, saw a lot of like similarities to me. And so just kind of started dabbling in the waters. And so that's how we initially met, was actually on the mats through Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Nice, nice. And then, how did you end up hiring him? What role was he playing?
Yeah, so he was getting ready to graduate, and so I just put out the offer to him. I said, "Hey, I can see you're really smart. I've seen all the things you've been doing. Would you be interested in coming on and taking over marketing for me?" And I was still young myself. We're probably talking mid, starting to get into late 20s, maybe starting to grow a business. Had to be very scrappy, and he thought about it for a while, and after a while he agreed to come on and take over that role. And the funny thing is when I first started my business, I didn't really believe in marketing. I was very referral based. That's how I always got into things. But then, once I got into the real world, and this is also too, this is like when everything was busted. We're talking 2010, 2011, economy is in the tanks, housing market crash. So when I was really starting my business and growing it, it was at the worst time possible that you could start and grow a business, right? And so I realized like, hey, I can't just rely on referrals anymore. I need to actually start doing marketing. And
Hmm.
and this is where he really excelled. And so that's where I wanted to bring him in. And interestingly, the first thing I had him do is I had heard it, it was end of 2011. I'd been hearing a little bit about this software called HubSpot really early on. And marketing was so much simpler back then. But I essentially, when I hired him, the first thing I told him was I pretty much gave him like free reign and latitude. I said, I just signed up for HubSpot for our company. I said, I want you to learn the software. I want you to learn this methodology. And then after we're successful with it, after you're successful with it, I want you to then build a process for us to then do this for our clients as well, because we had primarily been a technical web development agency, and I wanted to start to bring in the marketing side as well. And of course, HubSpot's selling you on, hey, you do this for yourself, and that was kind of their strategy as with their partners. Do this for yourself, and then you can sell it as well once you get it, and you can start earning these big retainers, right?
Huh.
These great retainers. And so I was bought in, and I said, this is your mission, right? And I kind of just let him have at it. And it worked out really well. He went to work, he started to dive in, he started to understand the methodology, but he didn't really just stop at that. It really became so much more than just inbound marketing, which was simple at the time. He had become a full-fledged influencer. He turned himself into an influencer at a time when that wasn't really a thing. He became known for inbound marketing, and he turned our agency into being known for, at the time we were really into open source development, and he turned our agency into being a known influencer as well by him building his personal brand. He also built our brand, and our agency became known as like the go-to resource for web development, for open source web development, not just in our area, but worldwide. And so he hit that mission and then some. And you couldn't have asked for a better hire.
That's amazing. So can you talk about the specific incidents that where you saw a particular challenge or particular issue that you guys were facing, and how did he come in? So I just want to understand the way he operated and get a glimpse of understanding of why did you actually choose him as your first my best hire.
Right, right. So if you look at challenges, right, we're a small agency, maybe 10 people at the time, and we're all young. We're all in our 20s. There's no gray hairs. So, and we're still bootstrapping it. So if you talk about challenges, budget was a challenge. We don't have budget for all this expensive, like nice equipment to record videos and nice audio and setting all this up. But then also convincing people that these 20-year-old kids,
Hmm.
you're going to send them tens of thousands of dollars to do this work for you, right? And so we had to build credibility. We had to build a portfolio. We had to, build all this. And he was really able to do that. And that was from becoming the influencer, from showing our expertise, from having that latitude to do what he needed to do. He was able to hit those goals and really achieve that. And so he broke it down. He looked at, well, what do we need to do to get people to take us seriously? What do we need to do to be incredible? We have to position ourselves as thought leaders.
Hmm.
We ended up creating an entire course on inbound marketing with over like 300
Wow.
videos that we recorded and packaged that up into a course. And then eventually we made that, we actually put that out as an entire product that we sold as well, in addition to that, kind of within the agency. And so that was one of the things. But it was taking that challenge, breaking it down, and then being scrappy as well, being finding ways to do things on small budgets but still appear like this big agency. And people would
Hmm.
always tell us, like, you're only 10 people. Wow. Like, I can't believe that, with you guys, the way you guys look, the way you guys position yourselves, you seem like, much, much bigger than that. So that was one of the challenges, that he had to overcome. But I mean, too, just for him, he's just getting out of college, right? His first
Yeah.
job, his first like real job. Like, can you imagine anybody just coming in and just giving them full latitude to take over your marketing, coming straight out of college and just having
Hmm.
them hit the mark so well? And not only just hit the mark then for your agency where you have all these leads starting to come in, but then also then taking that and turning it into a business as well, and an entire department and an entire product line that you can then earn revenue off of. And that ended up, initially, I think, contributing to about 30% of our revenue eventually. Yeah. So not just hitting the mark with bringing in the leads, but then being able to service them and bringing in all of the revenue around it as well. And for somebody that was just coming out of college to do that within a few short years is something that's truly remarkable.
I can imagine that. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm trying to think like what was I doing when I got out of the college a few years? Nowhere close to this. So it might be helpful just to help understand, like when you're talking about agency, what's the nature of the business?
Yeah, so we primarily focused on mid-market companies. We were creating websites on one side of the agency, and then when Luke came in, he was doing inbound marketing for these mid-market businesses as well. And so that's really what our primary focus was at that time. And we had become really well known for what we did, and very early on, which eventually led us to getting acquired very quickly. I'd wanted, that was the goal for that agency, was to be acquired, but
Hmm.
we had become noticed very quickly in what we were doing in that HubSpot area. And eventually HubSpot's number one partner at the time, their partner of the year, bought us for those technical capabilities. And so beyond that, he contributed to us getting acquired and then hitting that goal, albeit earlier than I wanted to in the life cycle of the business. But
Okay,
when the opportunity presents itself, you have to take it sometimes.
that's true. So is there a particular incident that you remember that the that you thought that wow, this is amazing?
Yes, multiple times.
Okay.
But I'd say the first time is just when you start to see all the fruits of this labor coming in, right? And
Hmm.
and executing on this inbound marketing strategy, and then leads are starting to roll in, right? You're starting to get them not just one, but a lot of leads coming in and starting to have these conversations. And me being the main salesperson for the business, starting to be like, ding, that's another one that I can call, another one I could call.
Okay.
And we did zero outbound marketing. We were 100% focused on inbound. We didn't do any ads. We didn't do any advertising. That was like purely our focus, and it worked, and it worked so well. And
Wow.
and again, you have to remember, this is somebody who's fresh out of college just hitting the mark. So there's moments like that, but then it just continues throughout that. Luke was like a partner. I didn't treat him like an employee. I treated him like another partner. I didn't micromanage. I gave him full latitude. I gave him the big picture and I gave him the goal, and he was just able to execute it pretty much at will. And I think that's one of the things that when you have an A player, you have to give them the space they need and the resources and let them execute. And that's one of the really kind of key things that I learned from that whole process, because too, look, just to be honest, I sometimes could be a micromanager with other people. And I think that's one of the things that I learned from all of that is if you set the
Hmm.
right boundaries and you set the right guidelines for people, you give them the area to work. And I think that was one of the turning points for me. And one of the things that I learned personally from that is when you have so much riding on the line, when you have everybody's salaries on the line, like I like to be in the business, I like to be watching, I like to, and I think that was one of the things that, like, if you get the right people in place, you can give them the space they need. You don't have to be on top of things. And that was a big growth moment for me, I think, as well.
So, what are the skills and capabilities that Luke demonstrated that you think allowed him to actually operate at this level?
I think there's a few things that he had and that I always looked for as well. But it was a passion for learning, really wanting to understand and learn and continue to grow.
Hmm.
I think it was a passion for excellence, and that they enjoyed doing what they did, right? Like, it
Hmm.
wasn't, for some people, when you can find that sweet spot, when it's not work for them, right?
Yeah.
When they're goal oriented, like you get that combination, like enjoys learning, enjoys what they're doing, and is motivated and goal driven.
Yeah.
That's a perfect combo for success. And that was something that I always like to look for and I like to screen for. I've tried all kinds of different things in the hiring process, all kinds of crazy things, some things that I look back on and be like, wow, did I really do that? That was, I think over time, that's the things that I really looked for and learned. And especially when you're a small business, one hire, you could see this was one hire. One hire
Yeah.
can make all the difference in the world, especially when you're that small. When you have thousands, hundreds of employees, one hire, you're very like easily replaceable. In a small business, one hire can like scale or completely tank your business. And so I obsessed over who I would hire. It was
Hmm.
very important. I wanted to make sure that that was the right person. And I think we got it right a majority of the time. We had a really great team.
I get that.
This hiring process wasn't a typical one because we were at the gym together. I got to know him. I got to see his work. We had some smaller projects together to kind of test the waters on both sides, because for him as an
Yeah.
entrepreneur, did he just want to kind of continue his path of what he was doing and kind of continue that? Or did he want to kind of jump into this world and start to look at, what we were doing?
Yeah.
And so it was a little bit of a vetting process for both of us. And I got to know him throughout that process. And so by the time we got to the end of that and it was like ready to make a decision whether he wanted to be in or out, it was pretty clear. So we got to know each other. We got to understand, is this the right fit for both of us? And I think at that time
Hmm.
it was. So by the time he got into the office, it was very clear. And the way he dove into things and the way he just started executing right away, it was very clear, like, yeah, this was the right hire. There was no, is this right? Is he going to do well? It was like instantly, he's crushing it.
Very cool. So you touched upon this a little bit about giving him the latitude as well as the freedom to operate how he wanted and not micromanage. Can you dive a little bit deeper into it and speak about what's your philosophy, what's your methodology as a leader to bring these people in and then help them thrive?
Yeah. So what I learned over time and how I like to manage and lead is I like to set those goals. And I
Hmm.
like to spend a lot of time onboarding and being very close with that person early on, spending a lot of time with them, understanding how they work, understanding how I work, and then understanding what motivates them because there's no better way to influence a person and kind of move them in the right direction than if you understand what makes them tick, what motivates them. And that's going to be a little bit different for every person. What are their career goals? What do they enjoy doing? What's their
Hmm.
working style? Everybody's a little different. And so you have to understand that. And so at the beginning, I like to be very close. I like to introduce them to the role. I like to show them how we've done things so far and then slowly wean off and then continue to give them more space as they get deeper and deeper into the process. But at the same time, being close, you get to know the person, you get to understand that working style, how they tick. And then after time, then you're able to kind of give them that latitude. But of course, it's very important, especially with A players, that you don't
Yeah.
just ignore them after that, right? It can be very
Yeah.
easily to get into they're performing really well, like just let them do their thing. Like you still need to give that encouragement. You still need to give them, you know, depending on who that person is, do they want to be acknowledged, do they not want to be acknowledged, do they, how do they like to be, acknowledged,
Hmm.
and understanding that, but then continuing to have those conversations, continuing to give feedback, because especially with A players, they want that feedback, they want to know how they can improve, and a lot of times sometimes it can be hard to find that, right? Hard to find that pass, when you're doing such a good job performing. And so I think it's important to keep those touch bases, keep motivating them, keep promoting them, keep giving them, keep showing them growth within the company, and that's something that's I think is really important.
Understood. So you were talking to me about there were some interesting stories and some interesting pieces that you wanted to speak about. So do you want to speak about this now?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think honestly, a lot of it's kind of come up just in the way you meet people, right, and the way you
Yeah.
bring people on. I think another really interesting thing is that we were still teammates in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so we would see each other at work. And Luke had started about a year ahead of me in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I had the wrestling background, but he was more technical and smarter. So
Okay.
imagine being able to be at work with your boss. The next thing you're at your mats with your boss, and you can kick his butt. So he's, we're working together at the office, but then he's teaching me after hours on the mats and how he's succeeding in this. And he was great at jujitsu, another one of his passions. And like I
Hmm.
said, A players, he studied that as well and got really good at that and became one of the top competitors in the area. And I learned so much from him, off the mats at that. But then on top of that, all these years later, right? I sold the company. Luke decided he wanted to go off to HubSpot. He got recruited over to HubSpot after I sold the company shortly. But then all these years later, Luke actually ended up hiring me and was my boss at HubSpot as well. Initially, I was happy where I was and what I was doing, and then started to kind of get a little bored. And he had the right timing and said, "Hey, why don't you I'm getting promoted. I'm looking for a backfill for my role, and I think you'd actually be
Hmm.
great for it." And then all those years later, he ended up hiring me, and he became my boss. And we still manage that great relationship. I still kind of keep in touch with him. Actually, we have a call later today. I'm going to be talking to him, just kind of catching up on a personal level, and I still seek his advice and guidance, and vice versa. And we still have that great working relationship to this day.
Nice. Very cool. Very cool. This is very unique. Like I haven't come across this. So how was it working for you with Luke?
When I was working for him, you mean? For me, I'm a no ego person. It was no different. I looked up to him. He had, he went off and he was in SaaS for many years before I transitioned over that area. And so he took those same skills that he did to become successful at our company and did that same thing at HubSpot. He's a total HubSpot rock star over there, very well regarded within that company. And he's very well known just still within that industry. He took that same methodology used for us and applied it for
Mhm.
them and has done wonders over there. And so he had so much knowledge over there. I just soaked it all in, learned as much as I could. I became the mentee and took it all in and learned so much from him and from HubSpot at that company, and really just enjoyed my experience there. And he was a great manager as well on his side and a great leader.
Mhm.
And it was a great working combo.
That's wow. That just shows the level of maturity and the relationship that you folks had and the mutual respect that you demonstrated, right? From being on the mats to going and working for him. Can you talk about the team dynamics that Luke demonstrated while he worked with you, as well as later on at HubSpot when you worked in his team?
Yeah. I think it's being humble is one thing. There was no ego at any point, right? Even though he was hitting these goals, I think being like a servant leader, he was always
Mhm.
like anybody else on the team that needed help, he was there to help out. He was helping them, he was teaching them. He loved teaching, he loved coaching. To this day, still loves teaching, loves coaching, loves advising. He ended up opening his own Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym at one point, as well, to continue teaching, coaching. So he was very much what I would call a servant leader, and was there to help, no ego, and was there to be a goal. And I think, being that servant leader, that just carries through. And it's the same things we talked about earlier. That thirst for learning, that passion for what you're doing, not seeing it as a role, but seeing it as something that you enjoy doing, that you want to do in a day out and day out basis. And then also something that I see from him, which I really admire to this day still, is he is very much work hard, play hard, but lives it. Every weekend, Luke is on an adventure somewhere. He's in California now. He explores that state inside and out. He's going to all the state parks. He's camping. He's surfing. So he works very, very hard, and I still see it. He's at a very hard pace, but he enjoys
Mhm.
his time on the weekends and makes the best of things. And so he's able to separate, take some time for himself so that he can keep working so hard. And I think that is something that, is really important, not to get burned out, because you can really easily get burned out when you're working so hard.
So, how did working with Luke impact your professional outlook about people?
There's a lot of really great people out there. You have to find the right people. And for me, I've always said this, and I've always really believed this. There's a lot of really great talent out there, but it's
Mhm.
finding the right fit for the right place, right? There's this saying in that I've all heard before in different coaching and business methodologies, was right person, right seat, right? You can be the best person, but if you're not in the right seat or for the right company, it's not going to be a right fit. And so that's also one thing that I strongly believe. It's like right person, right seat. There's a lot of really talented people out there, and it's go where you're valued. And so it's really vetting and making sure that you're in the right role and for the right seat. And that's one key takeaway for me that I have learned beyond just right person, right seat. It's a little bit about what we talked about earlier. It's understanding also what makes people tick and how to work with them. Everybody
Right.
has a little bit different way that you need to work with them. They have different things that make them tick. And as a leader, you need to understand and really be able to dive in. I think that's a skill that's not only applicable in just who you manage, it's also the other relationships within a business, because you're going to have to put influence on different people throughout a different role, throughout a different business. And to be able to properly influence them, you have to understand what motivates them and where you have shared and common goals. And so that's, I think, not just within leadership, that's also within just general relationships and business and life in general. And
Yeah.
and and I think the other thing too is that you can trust people, right? You can give people this leeway. You can set big audacious goals and give that trust. And if you have the right person in the right seat, they're going to go and they're going to hit those goals. And that's, I think, yeah, that would be my takeaways.
You're absolutely right. And I have a almost a controversial take on this is that wherever you go, there you are. So for me, there's not a huge difference between your personal life as well as your work life because it's the same person. Just
Right.
trying to maintain those two different versions of the people just doesn't work out in majority of the cases. You cannot be really this affable person at work and suddenly at life you become like okay really reserved or something. Yes, they are shades and you can definitely amplify or suppress some parts of the personalities some of the time. Okay, it just takes a lot of stress in order to try to maintain almost those two personas. So
I would say I totally agree with you, and I think one of the things too, if you're on the candidate side of this too,
yeah.
a lot of places will preach, you can bring your true self to work. But I think there are places that actually you can bring your true self to work, and there's places you can't. And I think, you know, and it's vetting from the both sides. Is this the right person for this? And then same thing, what type of company is this? Can I actually bring my true self to work?
So coming to the next question, you mentioned your hiring practices and the many interesting things that you have tried. You want to speak about some of those. What's the advice do you have for the recruiters, and what are some of the things that you have tried that actually help you find these amazing people?
One of the things I could say we did that didn't work, as I look back, I maybe thought it worked at the time, but as I look back on it, I'm like, wow, did we really do that? Is we did group interviews actually,
Okay.
and we would bring in like a lot of applicants at once, and we would tell them like, this is a group interview, this is the first one, but some of them wouldn't pay attention. They'd come and be like, what are all these other people doing here? And you'd be like, right away, okay, they're out. Like they didn't pay enough attention to the email even that we sent them. But then you'd kind of like be pitting candidate against candidate, and you might have some people who are maybe great candidates but were shy,
Yeah.
and you don't necessarily need that if it's not so. And you'd have some people who had very strong personalities and would speak up, and we'd ask them, we'd ask a question, and a candidate would give a response, and we'd tell another candidate randomly, what do you think about that response, right? And it was almost like, so it's almost like a fight pit for a role to some extent. And I look back and I'm like, wow, did we really do that? So that was,
Yes.
that was an interesting thing. But yeah, it was. Those are kind of some of the things that definitely stuck out.
Actually
But
have.
look, at the end of the day, you experiment, you try, you learn, you get better, right?
They, they like what you're talking about. That's called a group discussion. So my father was in military, and growing up in Air Force bases, I really wanted to be a pilot one point of time. I didn't go that direction, but there's basically there's a selection process that has this group discussion, and it exactly felt like when I went through that process, it actually felt like what you're talking about. It becomes basically a fighting pit in terms of where you are talking about this, people are talking over each other, how well you can structure and put together. Though the funny part was that the group I was part of, instead of getting into that space, we got really collaborative. And
Hmm.
many of us were engineers at that time. So there were like some physical challenges and that we needed to run through. And we made it like almost like a cantilever, and we had some mechanical engineers and all, and it became like a lot of fun. In fact, many
Oh,
of
that's
us
amazing.
kept in touch. We didn't join military, but we kept in touch afterwards.
Oh, that's such an amazing story. Now, I'm kind of really curious to the people running the exercise, how they reacted to that, and if it's like not what they wanted and they were angry and they
Not
wanted you,
well. Yeah. Yeah, they didn't react well about it at all. They were like, okay, hey, what's happening? And since we were not engineers, so we could talk about engineering. We were supposed to conduct military exercises where you have to carry somebody from one place to another, or you have to cross a bridge. So we were talking about like really technical engineering terms like a cantilever. Now the testers did not understand this. They're like, okay, hey, what are you
Mm,
guys talking about? Yeah, that was a fun one.
yeah.
Similarly, there's the other questions as well that I have stopped doing. If you were an animal, what kind of animal would you
Mm.
be? Like, I found those questions very silly most of the time, but there's a lot of research that has come about that those questions and somebody being able to answer those questions has nothing to do with the job performance.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And I'm glad I never went that route. And I see people complaining about it still. I know some big companies that still employ some of those practices, and it's like, what does this have to do with my role? Like, I understand you want to see what my critical thinking and thinking process is like, but I think there's probably better ways you can achieve that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. So now we spoke about recruiting. I would love to understand a little bit more about what advice would you have for the leaders who want to get the best out of the people that they have. There's a lot of potential in every person, as you very rightly said, that there's basically a fit between the individual, the team, the company, and then the managers that they are working with. So it becomes really important to understand and identify that what's the fit. And it is incumbent upon the leader to make sure that their team members are bringing their best to work every day?
One of the things that we actually did to screen for fit before we hired somebody is we would actually, and this is probably a little bit harder to do in remote world now, but we would actually just take them out and spend some time with them. Take them out for dinner, take them out for lunch, have a couple drinks with them. We'd bring the rest of the team with them, see how they interacted with the rest of the team. And so before extending an offer, we would actually just spend some time with them and understand, like, how do they fit into our culture? How do they, like taking them to a social event? How do they, with not a social event where you're not going to be able to talk, but
Yeah.
taking them to something where you're going to be able to talk and interact and
Hmm.
spend some time together and just see what they're like on a personal level, right? Kind of like you said earlier, you shouldn't have to bring your different work self and your different personal self. You want to be able to interact. And so that was one of the things that we would do before the end is we would take them out, understand that. Once you vet for skills and you vet for all those other things, you're understanding that person personally, but you also have the opportunity to just talk shop, right? Like
Yeah.
you can understand, like, what have they been researching? What are they passionate about in their own time? And once you start to talk shop, you can really understand they're more relaxed. They're not as on guard, right? And when you're
Hmm.
more relaxed and not on guard, you start to really understand, do they really know what they're talking about, right? How do they
Yeah.
fit into this? Like, are they going and reading the same articles that I'm reading or going to similar spaces? Or maybe did I learn something new and I want to actually go that and they're smarter than me? Because I firmly have always believed in hiring smarter people than you. And so I think you get to feel a lot of things out when you do more unique things like that and just getting to know them and understanding. They're still going to be on guard to some extent, but
Sure.
once you start to get 2 hours in or whatever into that experience, they start to let go of the guard. They start to put it down a little bit, and you can kind of start to get their true self a little bit out, especially if they're maybe a beer or two in. You know,
All right. Now, next question, you have to be really honest with me.
okay.
Okay. Did you take somebody to the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at any point in time?
Any of the other employees? I know we always talked about it. I don't think any of the other employees actually went through with it though. We always invited them, but I don't think any of them actually took us up on the offer ever. Especially too, because sometimes we would be traveling too. And that was one of the nice things. We would travel for conferences and we'd go to the local gym. And we actually met who ended up being a lot of famous competitors within that scene many years later because we would be traveling and we'd go train with them. And a lot of these people ended up being really big names later on down the line that we got to train with very really early on, just because as we were traveling, we'd go visit gyms and me and Luke would go. The others would be like, nah, I'm just going to go here or whatever. And it was, it's fine.
I get that. We are all professionals. And what advice would you have for other professionals to actually really come out and shine so that they can become the outstanding contributors to their companies, to their teams?
So, I think as I kind of talked about earlier is thirst for learning,
Hmm.
being humble, and I think helping others, honestly. That's always something that in me, I've always, to a fault to sometimes, I've always wanted to help my teammates. I've always wanted to be, and something I'm actually realizing now as I'm talking about this, all the traits that I actually talked about with Luke are similar traits that I have found in myself. And so
Hmm.
talking about fit and culture and how we both related and were able to work so well together, we shared a lot of the similar core traits, I think, which is, but being on top of learning and being on top of your industry and really understanding what's going on is key. Also, just doing things, just executing, not just doing what you're told, but going above and beyond. And for me, I've always done things outside of work
Yeah.
that I've just enjoyed. Like when AI was first starting, we're talking 2018, before AI became big in 2022. I was like, this is interesting. I started exploring it in my free time. I started kind of learning more and more about it. I started testing tools. When it popped off in 2022, I went all in out. So I took it and just started diving in. And that those are things that get realized. Like what I think one thing that sets people apart a lot of times is the people who do have that thirst for learning, who do take it upon themselves to try things out in their free time, and they're not doing it because they feel like they have to do it. They're doing it because they
Yeah.
like to do it. Right. I enjoyed those things. I enjoyed learning about that. I like keeping on top of those things and being kind of on the cutting edge of technology. And so yeah, I'd say those are some things that I've really recognized is helping out your teammates, continuing to have that thirst for learning, and then actually doing, not just learning, but actually executing and doing. Some people can learn without doing, but I think doing also shows an initiative and shows build. So I think if you're on the other side, I think that's some ways that you can clearly look and to set yourself apart.
Makes sense. Absolutely. And that's the recommendation at this point of time for everyone that we come across, whether they are looking for a job, not looking for a job. The world is changing so fast that we have to be immersed in it. If we are not, it's very, very easy to actually get left behind. And the real thing is, it's so much fun.
Yes. Yeah, I mean it's fun is like there's so much to dive into now, especially
Yeah.
specifically to AI. There's so much to dive into. The world is totally changing because of it, and it's like you almost have to pick your slice of this big board of all the different things I'm tracking because there's so much I wanted to learn. I had to start creating a list and tracking it because, and it's changing daily.
Sure.
It's fun. I love it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been absolutely amazing.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation, and yeah, I hope everybody else enjoyed it as well.
Thank you.